Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Fandom Portals Podcast. This is the podcast where we explore the fandoms that help us learn and grow. Today, I am joined by a very special guest. His name is Thomas, and he is from the Joy Shtick Podcast. He is also a frequent member of the Challenge Accepted podcast, and he's just started a new podcast called the Sick Burn Podcast. He's a really influential dude, and it has been such a pleasure to communicate with him on one of our favorite movies, Big Fish. So in this episode, we actually go into the artistry that is Tim Burton. We talk in depth about father-son relationships and the lessons that fathers can sometimes try to impart onto sons. We get a bit deep in this episode, guys, and we get a bit personal as well in terms of the content that we cover. So just a bit of a warning there. We do cover topics such as loss and grief as well. But if you are somebody who resonates with this episode, feel free to reach out to us on our social medias or email us. Those links are in the show notes below. We'd love to hear your stories, guys. This has been a really special episode and one of my all-time favorite movies, Big Fish. If you haven't seen it, make sure you go out and check it out. And we hope you enjoy this podcast as well, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in and for being a part of the Fandom Portals Podcast. This week, we have been looking at the movie Big Fish, and I'm joined by a very special guest. His name is Thomas, and he's from the Joy Shtick Show and a lot of other kind of podcasts as well. How you going today, Thomas?
Pretty good. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Loving the episodes you've been putting out, man. It's been really, really great. But I also want to shout out, Challenge Accepted on the Geek Freaks Network. We're on the same network together. And then, new podcast coming soon called Sick Burn Podcast.
And with those new podcasts that you're doing, obviously the Sick Burn one, all of these can be followed on Instagram, by the way, people. They'll be in the show notes below. Sick Burn's a little bit of a passion project for you. Did you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I love what you've got going on there too.
Yeah. Thank you. So basically, I was in a pretty bad accident in 2019 and it left me very badly beat up. It was in the hospital for a long time, recovering from that. And then I get out of the hospital and it's COVID, and I think the world, I saw a lot of people who were scared. I saw a lot of sadness and I saw just a lot of despair out there. And I really wanted to, I guess I learned so much from my accident and I found so many positives from it too later on. And I just kind of wanted to share some of that. But I know that just my story alone, won't be enough to kind of reach out to a ton of people. So I'm bringing on other guests who've had, these low moments, these hitting rock bottom moments, and how they took those lessons from those incidents and then used it to find happiness, find success, find peace. And so, that's kind of the whole idea around Sick Burn Podcast. The catchphrase is where we explore the bright side to life's darkest moments. And it's been a fun little, like you said, passion project for me.
No, it looks really awesome. I'm following your journey on social media and I can't wait for the episodes to drop because I think it's just a great space to chat and for people to listen to as well. People need, some more places like that to feel safe and comfortable to express the things that they need to express. So I admire what you're doing. And it takes a lot of bravery as well to, talk about yourself in that kind of manner and be vulnerable in that sort of space. So very, very admirable, Thomas. I love what you're doing there.
This too kind, man. Thanks. It's it's pretty easy. Once you've kind of been embarrassed in so many situations in a gown in the hospital, it's after that, you have no shame in that sense.
No, I can see that. That's so good, man. I love it. I can't wait for it to come out. Do you know timeline wise when it's going to drop, or is it just like how it's happening at the moment? You're just seeing how the Tetris blocks align and picking a date later.
Yeah. So hopefully right now we'll be launching by the end of February. It's based in San Diego and it's pretty cool. I've been lucky enough to sign on with the studio. So we're getting as many guests as we can in the studio. Obviously there will still be kind of remote options going on, but end of February. And if you got any ideas or topics you want to explore, there will be moments of solo episodes where we focus on topics like confidence or anger or self-doubt, all that kind of stuff too. So if you have something you want to throw in the mix and have us explore, I'm fully game for it.
That sounds absolutely awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely be following very closely and I'll be one of those guys that email the podcast a lot. So be prepared. Be prepared.
All the emails and reviews, keep it coming.
That's exactly my point of view as well. Anytime somebody sends something to you about the podcast, I read it so feverishly. It's awesome to get feedback. So I'm looking forward to it. All right. So as we talked about, we're talking about the movie Big Fish. This episode, I kind of watched this movie and I really wanted to do an episode on Fandom Portals. But and before we sort of get into it, we will start with our gratitudes and growths. But yeah, I'm really thankful that you were willing to come on and talk to me about it, Thomas, because obviously it does touch on some pretty, personal themes for people. So yeah, just as we're going through, just be prepared, everybody, that we might sort of go into some areas like that. And yeah, I just want to thank you so much for joining me and going on this ride with me. I couldn't think of anybody better to do it with, so appreciate you.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate this. We talked about this movie actually on Challenge Accepted. I've talked about it on a couple different podcasts actually, but to this day, I remember at 16 years old watching it, where I was on this couch with one of my first real serious girlfriends, and her trying to flirt with me and me being like, no, stop it. I'm trying to watch this movie. And like, that's how much I loved it. And it's crazy now, some 20 years later, I still consider this my favorite movie. And it's very interesting because I can see myself, going and aging with this movie and seeing it from different perspectives. So I appreciate you having me on to let me talk about it.
That's so awesome, man. And yeah, that kind of falls into our gratitudes and growths, which is what we do. Because each week we begin by sharing a personal gratitude for the week, or we can talk about a growth or an area that we need to grow on. My gratitude is obviously thanking you for coming on the podcast with me, but also my gratitude is being free on the weekends for me, because, there are some people that have no choice. They have to work through the week, or they have to work weekends or shift work and things like that. But for me, I always have that weekend bracket free, and it's a great time for me to chalk out and spend with my kids in a very valuable kind of way. So yeah, it's my favorite kind of time. Is my gratitude for this week is just really appreciative of the weekend time with the kids. And again, as I said, the time with you to podcast and talk about this awesome movie. So what about yourself in terms of gratitudes or growths for the week, Thomas? How are you going?
Yeah, I love your gratitudes, by the way. I think that's awesome. And yeah, it's, for me, I think it's something we don't do a lot, or at least when I see online, I don't see a lot of people talking about gratitude, what they're thankful for. And if you have done any little bit of research into mental health science, it's like one of the best ways to stay happy, to combat depression, to combat the side effects of society, if you will. And yeah, I think this week I was grateful for, or I am grateful for the healthy challenges. I've been lucky that I got to focus on this new podcast coming up, and I've really tried to push myself in ways where, I'm stepping out a little bit. For me, for other people might be like, oh, that's nothing. Don't worry about any of that. Oops, sorry. But I think, I think what I'm grateful for is that I'm able to put myself in a place where I can challenge myself and try to be a little bit more brave and be able to speak about things that maybe other people don't. So and then just having support and friends, like getting to meet you and being on this podcast. I think this is all great things that the world needs more of. Yeah,
I can totally relate, because the reason I started the gratitudes and growth segments was because I feel like one is a great way to sort of get to know people, and it puts things into perspective for you as well. Because I read somewhere as well that if you're consistently trying to look for gratitudes, then it kind of shifts the way that you think in terms of how you perceive a day, or how you perceive an event or a movie or things like that. So I just thought that was just a really kind of poignant thing to do at the start, just to sort of kick off. And yeah, I appreciate that you like it so much. And thanks for joining me on the gratitudes. It's awesome.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. This is great. This sets the mood for this kind of positive movie though, right?
Yeah, I think so. All right, let's jump into our first take segment. All right, our first take segment is where we discuss how we first encountered the media, what our initial impressions of the media were, our feelings of the media, and how we felt after we watched it. We also sort of share some of our community's thoughts on this as well, if we have any sort of responses from threads at this point. And yeah, if you want to join in those sorts of conversations, the threads link is in the description below. So before we jump in on that, the sort of plot outline of this movie, we're doing Big Fish. We are looking at Big Fish today.
Dad, I have no idea who you are.
What do you want, Will? Who do you want me to be?
Just yourself. Just show me who you are for once.
Discover an adventure as big as life itself.
telling the story of my father's life.
Bravo Company, go!
Doesn't always make sense, but that's what kind of story this is.
Big Fish.
It's kind of about a frustrated son that tries to determine the fact and the fiction from his father's life as he is dying. It's told from two perspectives. One that's set very much in the past and tells the story of Edward Bloom when he was a young man. It's very highly fantasized and fictionalized, as his father is a storyteller by nature. And then that couples with the darker sort of undertone of his father being old. So Edward Bloom being old and his son Will, grappling with the fact that he never really knew his father because of the stories that he told. So that's a little bit of the plot outline. We might start with you, though, for your first takes, Thomas. You kind of went into it a little bit earlier, but how did you first encounter this movie? How did you feel after watching it?
Yeah, I know. I totally jumped the gun on that. Sorry. But high school, and I don't know why we selected it. Again, it was serious for me, which was just like maybe handholds and a few kisses and stuff. And like with this girl that we were at her house, and for some reason we just put on this movie. And from the second I watched it, all of a sudden, it really made me feel like, oh, I get this guy. I'm from Hawaii, and we talked about it before we started recording. Like what's Hawaii really like? People have those perceptions of it being this holiday place and, just being casual and laid back. And it is those things. But I think I always felt that I wanted to do more. I love Hawaii and I love my family and my friends and the people there. But I also wanted to experience the world and see what else was out there. And was I meant for more? And so when you watch this story of Edward, it really kind of spoke to me. But then there was this counter side where in my growing up, my dad is a huge storyteller. And so he's a salesperson, but he tries to just connect with people. And that's really how he's been so successful at selling. But I can't tell you how many times growing up, I heard him tell the same story over and over again. Like if there's something that happened on the weekend, he would tell it 10 times in one day and it would drive me nuts. And then every time it would become more bombastic and more over the top. And it used to just frustrate the hell out of me. And so from multiple angles, I really kind of understood Edward and I really understood Will. And so it was like this weird thing when I was watching this movie the first time that I just really felt spoken to. And yeah, I was like, holy crap, I don't know how this movie came into existence. It just felt like it was made for me.
Yeah, man, so much of what you said resonates because my first take of this movie, I watched it with my father and I was probably a similar age, 14, 15, 16, somewhere around there. And he watched it and it was one of the first times I remember seeing my dad cry, for one, to a movie. And then for two, I looked at that and I was a little bit confused because I didn't conceptually understand the movie for what it was. I think when I was a kid and I watched it, I was definitely taken up with the fantastical elements of Ed Bloom's story. I was looking at the fantasy, I was looking at the fairy tale, and I was thinking it was just like a whimsical fantasy tale. And then I looked to my dad and he's like, by the end of the movie, he's started to tear up and cry. And I'm thinking how, like, this is a man that I've seen that's been like pretty strong all his life, tearing up to a movie like this that features, giants and wolves and twins and things like that. I'm like, yeah, there's something deeper here. And I rewatched it again last year and then again this year and then again before this podcast. So I've seen it a few times. And as we talked about before, each time I've watched it, I've taken something new or different away. And I think for me, I'm obviously drawn into that father-son story at the central sort of crux of the movie, but I find myself just like Will trying to find the truth in the fantasy sort of story. I don't know what draws me to that, but like when Ed Bloom sort of starts to tell his fantastical tales, I'm like, okay, so what part of this is the true thing that happened to him? And then what sort of fantastical element has he embellished into this story here? And then obviously there's the themes that go through it as well. So I think for me, each time I've watched it, it's been different. But that first time, that thing that really drew me in was the fact that, yeah, this is one of the first movies that I watched and saw like my father just have an emotional response to, which was like, and he's not a cold man or a callous man or anything like that, but he wasn't one to really like become emotional.
Show his emotions?
Yeah, towards movies at least. So yeah, that was just different for me. And I think that, yeah, for my first take, it's just, yeah, this is just a movie that's kind of stuck with me. And I wanted to revisit it again when I was a bit older. So just like you, I think this is up there for me. I'm just going to talk about some things about like the movie. For example, this was directed by Tim Burton. Not really a fan of Tim Burton usually. I love his 2 Batman movies, and I kind of stay away from his more weirder stuff because that's not really my style. And yeah, watching this one, it's kind of a step away from what he usually does, but it's still got those Tim Burton sort of elements in it. Did you know this was directed by Tim Burton when you watched it? Are you a fan of Tim Burton's work?
Not originally. I didn't know it was Tim Burton. And it was years later when I rewatched it again, I was like, wait, what? Tim Burton? Because you can kind of see it with the over the topness and with some of the fantastical elements, especially when he goes through the woods to get to the town of Spectre. You're like, okay, I could see some Tim Burton here. But you're right. It is kind of subdued for him. It's not as over the top. It's not as like almost farcical, like you would get from a Beetlejuice or Edward Scissorhands or something like that, where it's like so over the top. But this is a lot more grounded in a weird way. When you're looking at the relationship from Will's perspective, it's to me, very grounded for a Tim Burton thing. And I guess I didn't realize that till way later on.
Yeah. And I think for me, that sort of grounded aspect is enough to keep me in because I have a very, I'll say squeamish sort of appetite for movies that sort of make me feel uncomfortable. But I think Tim Burton in this sort of regard, it's sort of just enough. And the fantastical element of it is it's really amazing because it's poignant to the story and to Ed Bloom's character as well. Starring Ewan McGregor, Albert Finney, and Billy Crudup. I think Ewan McGregor in this one, he kind of has 2 styles, doesn't he, Ewan McGregor? When we look at him, he's got the train spotting Ewan McGregor that we see that's a little bit unhinged. And then we've got this innocence of Ewan McGregor that we see in this movie, or we see it in movies like the Winnie the Pooh movie when he plays Christopher Robin, or we see it in Moulin Rouge. He kind of plays that innocent sort of doe-eyed, very much in love sort of character. I really liked Ewan McGregor in this movie. What about yourself?
Yeah. I think you said it amazingly well, but it's this perspective that he has and this determination in this movie, right? It's just inspiring. And yeah, there is an innocence to him. And yet some people could say, hey, he's just being naive, but everything he commits to, it ends up working. So, I think that did speak to me too as a kid, where it's like, hey, he has this determination. And if you work hard for it, and if you stay lightning focused on this, like you can achieve it. And of course, as you age, things become more and more apparent. But as a kid, gosh, that like really spoke to me. I'm like, I could do this, and I found ways to kind of motivate myself. And maybe it was credit to this movie really kind of seeping into my subconscious. But I think I just love his determination in it and his positivity. And yeah, again, there's a little bit of naivety, but it just keeps working out because he's kind about it, because he really does care at the root of why he's doing everything. I really love Ewan McGregor. It's probably one of my favorite roles that I've seen him in. Yeah,
it's probably one of mine too. Definitely top 3. I think just that and the color that Tim Burton uses in the fantastical sort of story sequences, combined with the later sequences when Will's around and Ed is an older man and he's getting sick, just that color shift palette really sets the tone and the mood, because you're in that whimsical sort of storytelling land, which is obviously the intention of Ed Bloom's stories, is to make them that sort of fantastical place. But then when he's in the real world, we'll say with quotes, and he's suffering from an illness and he's at the end of his life, it's almost like blues and grays and undertones of browns and things like that you're watching and visually seeing. And his son's all kind of morose in that area too. So even that visual storytelling style that Tim Burton uses in this is very juxtaposing. And I like that because it literally symbolizes what the characters are feeling in those moments. So it's a very talented kind of area for Tim Burton and the cinematography team to do in this movie. It's really good.
Such a great call out. You're right. As we look at some of the maybe fairy tales in the story, there's like a haze on it, almost like a filter. And I think about it all the time when he gets to Spectre, because that first time he gets there, before one, the town is pristine and everybody's not wearing shoes and they're dancing in the middle of the road on the grass.
Which is perfectly cut too. The grass is just immaculate. Everybody's lawn needs to be like Spectre's.
Right. And that adds to another fantastical element too. But when he later goes back and the town has kind of fallen apart because they put up that road and it's completely changed the town, it loses that filter. And so I think you're so right. Like I've thought about this, but not in that word. Like it's all of a sudden you said it and now it's clicked in my head that you're right. It's also showing whose perspective we're seeing this part of the story from. And you're right. It's such a good way to kind of show us, the storytelling.
When he first went to the circus, and there's obviously the color shifts and the beautiful sort of dynamics there, but there's a scene that comes to mind where he talks about the first moment that he saw Sandra, his future wife.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, thank you all for coming. Drive home safely, everyone. Thank you for coming.
It was on that night Carl met his destiny, and I met mine, almost. They say when you meet the love of your life, time stops. And that's true.
And then there's that scene that everybody's seen the picture of Ewan McGregor walking through the frozen space, ducking between the circus actors and moving the popcorn aside. And it's just like, that for me it's such a good representation of what it's like when a young man falls in love or sees the lady of his dreams, because time obviously doesn't really stop, but you have blinders. Like there is nothing else that you can see, and there's nothing else that you are thinking about, and there's nothing else that you're motivated by. And that's reflected in Ed's story as well, because, in the fantastical story, he says he works for Amos, who's played by Danny DeVito, the circus handler. He works for him for free, and the only thing he wants in return is one piece of information every month. And that kind of drive and that kind of determination for, the woman that you love, when you see that, I found that very sort of endearing to me, because I'm a guy that heart's on the sleeve. As soon as if you feel something, you go for it, that kind of thing. And it's just, I think Ed Bloom sort of reflected that. And that was the scene for me that was just like, this guy, he's truly in love with his wife, and it mirrors to me the journey that men go through when they have that moment. I don't know if you can relate, but like when you meet somebody and you have that sort of, I want to be with this person, you kind of, he does as well. He kind of starts to analyze his entire life. And Amos says, you're a big shot back in Ashton, and now you're here, you've got no job, you've got no prospects. Like who the heck are you? And as a man,
do you actually have?
Yeah, you kind of reflect on that, and you're just like, what do I have to offer a woman that you want to protect and provide for the rest of your life? So you go through that change and you work hard, just like Edward did. And then my favorite part of it, the symbolic part of it, was Edward's backpack gets stolen at the circus. And for me, that kind of symbolized the backpack that he took from Ashton had everything, every single one of his possessions that reflected who he was as a person when he left his small town. And when he lost his backpack, it was almost like that moment of, now I'm becoming a new man. I've lost, or I still have everything from my past, but it's now lost, so to speak, and I'm changing. So it was that moment there, and these kind of subtleties are just riddled through the whole movie. And it's just every perspective that I look at is a different time to analyze and a different look at the stage of Ed's life, and how Edward as a senior man reflects on it and tells the story to his son. It's just like, it's brilliant for me to look at and just pick apart, which I know a lot of people might do or not, but yeah, I loved it.
You're right. Yes, I think I'm a romantic at heart as well. And it was probably cheesy to say, but yeah, that circus scene, when I watched it the first time, I was like, that's the kind of love I want to find, and that's how I want to feel about, whoever I'm married with. And I think I've had those moments definitely with my wife now. So I'm very lucky, but yeah, it was just this perfect representation of like, the world doesn't matter at that moment. Once you find that person, it's like, you're right. The blinders are on and you become laser focused. And I love it from just like the way that everything stops. This movie doesn't actually use a lot of, I feel like, CGI special effects. There's a lot of practical effects in this movie that are awesome. And this is one of those moments where there is like a little bit of CGI. He's walking through the hoop and he's brushing the popcorn and it all falls out of the sky. And even that moment, it's like when, once time stops, everything speeds up. And I feel like I've felt that in a weird way. It was just this great kind of representation. And I think you said you said it best when we were young, especially as young men, you're like that first love or, you find you're like, oh my gosh, you're just so locked in.
It's a flood, isn't
yeah.
it? It's just like a massive flood that you get in that feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I just love that scene. And I loved, again, the determination. And you talked about the backpack being taken. You're right. It's like, did he really have everything inside of him? Or was it because he was a collection of things from his past? And so this is now like, you can't rely on everything from the past. You have to then determine, does that matter in who I am and now moving forward? So, man, I think you nailed it. You're also like enlightening me to this movie that I've seen so many times. But I love that because he says to him, I may not have much, but I have more determination than any man you've ever met.
Yep.
And I'm gonna keep pushing forward and months just to get little tidbits of her. It makes you think like, would I do that for the person I love? And it also makes you think if I wouldn't do that for the person I love, is it the right kind of love? And maybe, it's very Hollywood and maybe it's not the right representation, but I think it does speak to the romantic in me.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this shift that he went through with the backpack as well, it kind of emulates the, because from his own town, he had all the accolades. He was the sports star. He was one of the most popular people in his town, and he had a lot of sort of possessions. But then, as you spoke about just then, he said, "I'm probably the most determined man that you'll ever meet," and that is a value as opposed to a possession. So when men go through this kind of thing where they're going through a shift, whether it be in career or you're starting a family or you've met the woman that you want to marry, you really sort of look towards your values and you build from there. So he knows that he's determined. He knows that that's what he is as a person, and he builds on from that and proves it at every point because he knows that those values are what he can offer this woman as opposed to the things that he's bringing to the table. And that is reflected also in the scene where he goes through these, I'll say outlandish, but these absolutely bombastic romantic gestures, like the famous scene of the daffodils in the courtyard of Auburn.
Daffodils.
They're your favorite flower.
How did you get so many?
I called everywhere in 5 states. I told them it was the only way to get my wife to marry me.
You don't even know me.
I'll have the rest of my life to find out.
He's just standing there, this massive romantic gesture. And, that is based on the fact that he's determined enough to call these florists from 5 different counties and arrange it to all be there, whether the story is true or not. And that's the other thing. If the story is true, then that shows how romantic of a person he is. But if it is fantastical, and that's the way that he presented how he met his mother to his son, it's also Edward Sr. telling his son, if you're determined and if you love a woman, these are the kinds of gestures that, is responsive and reflect the way that you love somebody. And this is how much I loved your mother. Is sort of how he's sort of reflecting it. Because I always, as a father, I look at the stories that he's telling his son and I think to myself, what lesson is he trying to teach his son in this? Because...
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, because, why do people tell stories? To entertain or to inform? And I think when Ed was telling these stories to Will as a young boy, it was definitely to entertain. It was bedtime stories. And then as he grew up, obviously it was more to inform. So the same stories he retold and retold and retold because he knew that, these are fun stories for you as a kid, but also underlying there is a message here that I want you to know about life and about values and about how to treat a woman and about your work ethic. And that's what I took from it as well. Every single story, there's always a quote, and he'll say, and on that day I learnt, insert inspirational quote here. And that's kind of what I thought, he's trying to teach his son these things as he grows. So yeah, just full of takeaways.
Interesting. Yeah, it's funny. I've never looked at, I don't have kids yet, but I think I've never looked at the daffodil scene and thought, what lesson is he trying to teach his son here? But that's an interesting lens to look at it because you're right. On paper, it's just like this over-exaggerative story about how he had to try to win his mom. But from the lesson, if you had to paint it that way, it's like, if you truly love somebody, you have to go to this length. And if you don't go to that length, it's not, you're not doing enough. And I love that perspective because, it's showing his son. And ultimately, when you look later on in the movie, Will's a pretty good husband, I'd say. he's a little bit blocked off. He's a little bit emotionally stunted, but he really does care for his wife. And, he's excited to become a father too. And he's worried about it. But the dad's been teaching him all along, like, this is how you should treat your wife or, the mother of your kids. And yeah, that's cool. That's very astute on your end.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. The journey of Will, I think, even though it's not in the fantastical realm, the journey of Will, I think, is just as awesome to me as Ed's fantastical journey through the story, because Will obviously comes to us as a character who's very morose and upset with his father, having not spoken to him for three years. And he's obviously got a lot of animosity towards him because he never could find the truth behind the story. And as a viewer, I was also looking for the truth behind the story. Like, what's the tidbit that's real in his life here? And yeah, I want to sort of talk about our speculations on that a bit later. But as Will progresses, and obviously the epitomous end scene of Will joining him in his sort of storytelling and myth making craft, whether it be to satisfy his father or whether it is a true acceptance that Will has of his father and who he was as a man. It's just beautiful as a conclusion, because either way you look at it, Ed Bloom has either created a very empathetic and sympathetic and amazing son that he will put aside his own animosities in that moment to send his father off in the correct way, which is amazing as a father to have provided that sort of lesson for his son, for him to turn out that way. But then in the next part of it, it could also mean that he's truly taken on that sort of storytelling mantra, and he knows that there are lessons to be learnt in stories and there are purposes for them. And, his father might not have been a compulsive liar. It may have just been his way that he was communicating a mundane life, or it may have been the way he was communicating a lesson to him, or it's just his kind of way. And another thing that I thought as well, it might have been his way of communicating through like a post-traumatic stress.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because his storytelling that we see him, like, he obviously starts telling his son all these stories, and that's after he spent his time in the war. So all these sort of stories and these lessons that he's trying to teach, making them accessible, perhaps it's through that lens of him being sort of like stressed in a post-traumatic kind of way and releasing that to his son in that sort of perspective as well.
Oh, that's interesting too. I've never thought about it that way, and you're completely right. I think you said something earlier about just kind of relating to his son and how stories entertain and then inform. And I think it's that, like, there's this part where he is trying to entertain his son, but I think as he recites these stories over and over and over again, I think he really is trying to teach him something, and the son wasn't, at least at the time, or in certain ways, not receptive to the lessons. They might have been receptive to the entertainment, but now you just see your dad as a liar or over exaggerator. And I look back at my childhood too, and I remember my dad telling, the same stories over and over again, and people just cracking up or laughing or being amazed by it. And I used to think, gosh, this is so over exaggerative, and like, why does he keep repeating this? Like, I think I too had a lot of animosity at my dad for doing this thing. It's like, why are you being so over dramatic? And I have that a little bit. Like, anytime someone's being really over dramatic in a story, or sort of a top, it kind of irks me. But now, if I can take a step back from that and look at what they're trying to do, it is to entertain, it is to excite us. But again, like, now looking at my dad from the perspective of where I'm at, it's like there was lessons in here too. He was trying to teach not only me, but a bunch of other people something in here about the way you operate in life, about the way you show up for people, about the way that life can be random and you need to maybe appreciate it, or, there's other perspectives on it. And yeah, I think that's really a wonderful thing. And also, yeah, maybe this is his way of dealing with PTSD. With my accident, I've been diagnosed with that too. And it completely changes your perspective on the world. It really did for me. I had a complete perspective shift. And I think I've always been positive and always thought things are going to work out for the best, but I never could have imagined me in this situation. And so, how do you operate from there? How do you then look at life? I think sometimes you have to create a new story in your head to really handle the difficult parts in your life, because little things then become bigger. I mean, just truly, like everything from good and bad. And so, yeah, I like that kind of way of him trying to manifest his own healing because of how he tells stories. That's really unique.
Yeah. And oh man, I think that first of all, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that it's very sort of poignant to mention, because the way that he sort of tells stories, we're talking about the values as well. And he's obviously trying to talk about determination when he's at the circus and he's working. And then later on in the story, you know, he finds the town of Spectre in its new dilapidated state. And the small amounts of wealth that he's found, he's obviously used to try and help those people that helped him back then. And that might have been another lesson that he's trying to teach them about how to treat people and how you sort of use your wealth, or how you use your fortunate circumstances to help those that are less. And like those lessons that he's kind of underpinning throughout as just, it's, and another one that I've just thought of now as well as a lesson, when the first story that he ever tells in this movie is one about the witch. You know, he goes into the swamp with his friends, and there's a witch that has this eye that can tell you how you pass away. Now, if I'm thinking about why a father would tell a child that story, for me, it comes back to the fact that, you know, children are these anxious little things that you kind of have to send out into the world, into unknown situations, and you hope that you've given them enough in that time to survive and to have the tools to reflect and bounce back if anything bad happens. Now, Ed Bloom, sort of the crux of that story is the fact that Ed Bloom knew how he was going to die, and he said, "I am okay with that. I'm fine with that." And then every sort of challenge that he goes through along the way, thinking of the forest again, the trees were overcoming him, surrounding him, basically suffocating him, which I thought was an allegory for like an anxiety attack after leaving home. And as soon as he said, "This isn't how I go," the trees just retract. They drop him to the floor. And that's almost like the way that Ed Bloom Sr. was trying to tell his son, Will, if you don't fear the unknown, if you don't fear your own mortality and live presently in the moment, then nothing can bother you. And that's the biggest thing that will hold you back, is your own anxiety on what might happen if you don't try. So yeah, that was because that witch scene threw me at the start. I was like, why would he tell his kid that? But then, yeah, when I was looking at why, I thought, you know, that is just the perfect way to tell your kid. Well, it's not really a perfect way. It's a little bit macabre, but, you know, it's a great way to sort of tell him, you know, you will have these fears and they are real, but they should not stop you from doing the things that you want to do in your life and making that journey and taking that step.
Yeah. Oh, God, I love that, man. I didn't even, again, you are blowing my mind. A movie I've seen so many times and I've just never looked at it from this perspective. But I've always looked at that story as, how would you live if you knew you were going to die? You know, how brave would you be? How determined would you be? How, you know, because like, especially if you go out to your point in the world and, you know, you don't have a plan or seemingly don't have a plan, you're like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to make it? You know, I've had so many shifts in my life personally where I've really kind of stepped out and been like, I'm going to try this, you know, moving to, again, we call it the mainland, from Hawaii to mainland continental US. You know, I'm like, what am I going to do? I don't have my same support system. Later on, you know, after I had built what I thought was a pretty decent career, I realized like I want to take a chance and do my dream of becoming a commercial pilot, and sold everything, quit my job, saved up, and then went to flight school. Didn't know how that was going to work out. But all these moments, yeah, I was absolutely terrified and I didn't know how it was going to land. But I knew that if I didn't try, if I didn't believe in myself, if I didn't think that everything I had learned up to that point wouldn't get me through this, then I would have basically gotten in my own way. And so I love that analogy you said of like him being wrapped up in the forest and that anxiety attack. And just he continues to go out and step into bravery and realize like, hey, this isn't going to kill me. Not that it's not, you know, it might not kill you. It's not going to kill me. So how do I step out in bravery with my full self and just go for this? And I love that. I think that's something I've tried to hold on to. Maybe I got it from this movie or other people in my life, role models. But yeah, I feel like it really kind of speaks to me as a person. And I think we actually do have these narratives in our head sometimes that stop us. You know, I think there are fears that we make up that aren't real, that really debilitate us and stop us from going after what we need. And sometimes it's okay to push back on those thoughts. It's okay to push back on those feelings and be like, is this actually true? Or is this something I'm making up? And I really feel like in that moment, Edward is saying like, there was some stories I was telling myself and they weren't true, but I was able not to outthink it, not to even outplace it, but put something ahead of it. That's like, this is the story I want to tell myself, which is, hey, go out through this forest, get to Spectre. Maybe something's great out there. And it is actually great. So yeah, I love what you brought up. Gosh, I'm learning so much about this movie. I've seen so many times.
Yeah. It spoke to me too, because I think growing up, I'm a twin. So every single step that I made in life, I always had somebody there with me. So it was never truly scary. So if we started a new school, I didn't have to worry about making friends because I always had one. If we moved to towns, I didn't have to worry about joining a new soccer team all by myself because I had someone my age that was my friend as well. And in a way that was amazing because it helped me to do lots of different things with that support. But also my twin brother moved away, and then it became almost like a crutch. Like I wasn't used to going out and hanging out in different sort of situations without my brother there. Or if I engaged in like a new activity or I started a new job and I didn't sort of have that support network there to go back to. So I had to learn and grow to move past that, to sort of train myself and be sort of more present in my own sort of feelings. And I think the thing that I took away from that movie and the thing that I related to in that scene with the forest is Ed kind of, he does make that reality choice, you know, this isn't going to kill me, for one. But then for two, he also like sits in that feeling for a while. Like he sits in the anxious feeling, the uncomfortable feeling for a while. And then he realizes, you know, yes, this is uncomfortable. This is not ideal, but I'm going to be okay. And sitting in that feeling and being able to actually feel your feelings in a situation, in a way something reacts to you, is probably the healthiest way, in my unprofessional opinion, to deal with something. Because if you repress it, or if you push it down, or if you deny its existence, it's a good way for it to resurface, or it's a good way for you not to deal with it properly. But yeah, just sitting with your feelings and just taking stock basically on how you're feeling in this moment, what's coming, how can I proceed in a productive manner, is just, yeah, I think that's a lesson that he might have been trying to teach as well, and a valuable one.
Yeah, I think throughout this movie, Edward is a guy that sits with his feelings. You know, he's traveling on all these different trips. When he starts selling the Handomatic or whatever that crazy device is, he's constantly, sitting with it. He's thinking, but all of the thoughts and all of the execution out of those thoughts is to do something for others. It's for the people of Spectre. It's for his wife, getting her that house with the white picket fence, or for his son to make sure that he gets a job because he's technically dead and he can't get a job anywhere else. All of this stuff is truly for other people. And that's the wonderful thing, you know. I think these days and I think humans, again, this is my non-professional opinion, but being in a lot of therapy and talking to a lot of mental health professionals over the last 4 years, one thing I realize a lot is that, especially online, there's a negativity bias. There's always a negativity bias in us as humans because, I don't know if you believe in evolution or not, but it's like, if there was a saber-toothed tiger, it's better to be curious if there's a saber-toothed tiger over there than it is to be like, we're fine, walk in there and they get eaten. So I think it's easier to side on negativity, but that's what's beautiful about Edward. At every moment and every difficult obstacle, he finds what's going to be the best outcome for other people. You know, you could say it was kind of selfish too when he goes to Korea. He's in that war and he's taking every dangerous mission. It's really to get back to his wife so that he can be with her. And again, I guess it's kind of selfish, but he's also trying to support her. He's trying to be with her. He's trying to share that love. And Edward is an amazing example of maybe sitting with your thoughts and then still realizing like there are good outcomes that I can do, and let's go after it and let's do it.
Yeah. And he's so right. And I think that war scene as well, he doesn't shy away from the duty that he's given with when he's conscripted. And then going back to the thing we were talking about values, when he's talking to the Siamese twins, his survival, you might say, was underpinned by the fact that he showed the picture of Sandra and he told them how much he loved his wife. And that to me was like an allegory for or the truth in the situation there might have been, while he was in the war and he was suffering from all those things behind enemy lines, because it was true that he went missing for a while. There was a documentation that Will found to prove that. The way that he got through that was by relying on the values that he has of how much he loves his wife and that's the value that he taught his son, you know, pushing through. If you fall back to love and you have that person, that's your anchor, that's your rock, if you focus in on that and pour your feelings into that, and you are determined and move forward in every aspect of yourself with that anchor, then you can get through all the battlefields of life, or the battlefields literally in Korea. And I just absolutely loved the fact that there's these sort of subtle little ties throughout the whole thing that he's just trying to sort of teach. But, you know, the one thing I don't kind of understand, or the thing that I can't sort of connect with this movie is, you know, his relationship with Jenny, the girl inspector, and the obviously the older lady that he sort of sees and fixes her house with. So, because I know that story didn't come from Ed Bloom, that story came from Jenny herself. And I'm wondering what your perspective is on that sort of element, because there's a lot of contention online about, you know, whether he was unfaithful or whether he had a second life. And I know that that's something that Will echoed as well. Like, did he have a second life? And it was interesting to hear Will say, you know, sometimes I feel like he has a second family. And then that was mirrored by Jenny when she said, his real life was you. So there was that duality there. So I'm wondering what your perspective is on that sort of take, and what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. I mean, if I want to be completely optimistic, it's no, he wasn't unfaithful. And he just felt like he had this responsibility to her because he saw her when she was young. He made this promise, and maybe he just felt bad. I mean, there's that point too where he kind of shies away. She tries to like make a move on him, and then he was like, no, you know, I only have one love. I think that's the optimistic way to look at it. But I mean, I don't know. No, I don't think he did. If I had to just make a concrete, like, I don't think he did. I just think he really felt that he owed her something for whatever reason. I think there's certain people in our lives, like, they're in it and they may have changed, and maybe we don't even align with them anymore at all. But, you know, because of this history, we feel like we owe them something. And Edward being a caring person was like, I'm going to see this through. Like, I'm going to try to make this right with you. Like, I can't emotionally support you in this way, but I can at least fix your house, and I can at least set you up for the rest of your life. And yeah, I don't know. I guess maybe that's being naive or being optimistic, but that's the way I kind of lean with it.
Yeah. And I think that's okay to do. You know, stories are for us to perceive in the way that we want to. And it's definitely there. Like that perspective is definitely there. And I think that for Edward going in, it was really sort of about fixing up that town, that space, because the road brought in all new kinds of challenges to Spectre. And I love the line that she said. What was it? I've got it here. Hang on. That's it. Yeah. So Helena Bonham Carter's character, Jenny, she says, fate has a way of circling back on a man and taking him by surprise. And then she also says in that same sentence, men see things differently at different times of their life. And this town didn't seem the same now that he was older. And when he's looking at, that's like the veneer of childhood glare, isn't it? When you're looking at things as a child or as a young person, everything's shiny and new and colorful and brilliant, as Spectre was. And then as you get older, as you said, you have that negativity bias. Things have happened in your life that has hurt you or jaded you towards various different sort of opinions. And the thing that you once thought was beautiful might not have been as beautiful a second time around. So when you're looking at it for a second time and he goes in and he sees that thing that he once thought was amazing, a lot of people might think, well, that was just me being an innocent and,
naive
ignorant child. Yes, thank you. Ignorant child. But he didn't do that. He kind of went in and he said, this can be beautiful again. I can let other people see what I saw, and I can go and fix this and give it to other people to experience. And I think that's the way that I like to take it, is that it made such an impact on him in his past. And when he saw it in its state currently, he was just heartbroken and morose at the fact that other people couldn't experience what he did. So he went and he tried to give that again. So I think that quote sort of sits with me, because the way you look at things as a child and the way you look at things as an adult is completely different.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, there's definitely, I appreciate it coming from you, because you have this amazing insight on it and a completely different perspective. I love just the act of, I'm going to build your house because I feel like I owe you something, and I don't care if you sell it to me or not. I'm just going to help you. I love that perspective. But what you're saying too is of seeing things as a kid, and then now you see it change, and other people can only see the change. but you want to show them what it was like before, the special, the light that was in there. I think that's a really cool way to look at it. It's a very Edward way to look at things too.
I think the last thing that I kind of want to talk about is that father-son sort of relationship that's happening, because for me, Will and Edward go through some transitions. As men ourselves, I can attest, at least for me, that my relationship with my father has been pretty much a similar trajectory towards Will. You know, when you're a kid, everybody sort of looks towards their father and sees them as the hero, like the stalwart, the big tough guy that can't do no wrong, the protector. And that's the way. And also, you could align that similarly with how he sees Spectre as well. And then as he grows older, obviously he sees those flaws, those cracks. And then for me, there was some things that when I was a teenager, and me and my father obviously sort of butted heads a little bit. And then as you sort of grow older, and as I became a father myself, I saw the human sort of aspect of my dad. So my dad traveled a lot for work as well. We used to live in Wollongong, and then he would drive to Sydney, which is 3 hours away, and then he'd drive back. So, and then he'd work 8 hours a day. So I'd go to school and I'd never see him because he would be up working, and then he'd be at home, and then when he's at home, he'd be sleeping. So it was really sort of difficult for me as a kid because all I wanted was for him to be around. I just wanted him to be there. And that's kind of how it's reflected on me as a father myself, because I've put myself in a position where I am around. I'm a teacher. I'm here on the weekends all the time. I'm here in the afternoons all the time. So it's kind of psychologically structured me in that way. And, you know, as a kid and as a teenager, I didn't like the fact that he was gone. But now that I'm a father myself and a grown man, I look back at that and I think, like, how much did he sacrifice to provide for myself and my brothers and my mum? So my mum could be a stay-at-home parent, so she could experience the joy of raising us, you know, fully without having to work as most parents do now. Because for me, when I'm away from my kids and my family, that's like, it tears me apart because I just want to be around them all the time. And I know that for a fact as a father, my dad's very similar to me emotionally, and he would have felt the exact same way. And I didn't even consider that as a kid. But as I grew in perspective, that's something that I really sort of took on board, is the fact that my dad probably did want to be there just as much as I wanted him around. And the fact that he worked so hard to provide, like Edward did in the movie as well. It's just that realization and that shift that you have from childhood to adult. And as Will sort of goes through that, the point I'm trying to make is you begin to understand the man as opposed to your perspective of what a father should be or could be, or the things that they've done wrong for you, or the things they didn't give you. You start to sit there and think, you know, he sacrificed a lot. How would I feel in that position? You know, I have children now myself, trying to mirror those kind of values and perspectives and making sure that I look towards the things that he did, and I am appreciative of that and appreciative of what he gave, as opposed to looking at it with that negativity and thinking, what didn't I get? So that's how it made me think in the movie as well, is that on that sort of personal level, is the growth that you have in your relationship with your father or your significant parent as you grow on as an adult.
I love it, and I can relate to so much of what you're saying. Same thing. My dad was always working; he was always kind of gone, and you know, I remember a birthday, like kind of wanting him to be there, and he had somewhere to be, and just being really bummed out about that. And you're right, I didn't appreciate it later on in life. When I was in college, I got to work with him, and it was tough. Talk about butting heads, and just the way I looked at what he was doing, and then I was learning these things at college. I'm like, why are you doing it this way? I judged it pretty heavily. And it wasn't really till after my accident, again, almost, I don't know, 15 years later, that I really realized what he had done for us, you know? Same thing, you know, my mom was lucky. She didn't, not lucky. I mean, she did a lot of hard work too, but she, I guess in a way, was fortunate that she got to be around us so much and didn't have a 9-to-5 job, and, you know, got to be a stay-at-home parent. And, you know, I love my mom to death, but I would always kind of be like, why isn't dad here? You know, and same thing. When I was back home leaving for school, he was usually sleeping. And then when I was going to bed, he was either just coming home or, we were just kind of ships passing in the night. And I never really appreciated, never really understood it. And again, now after my accident, I look back at what he was able to do and support us. And there was nothing as kids where we're like, we really wanted this that we couldn't get, whether we had to wait for Christmas or not, we still got it. And you're right. Like I started looking at him as a person and the sacrifices he had to make and the effort he put in and all the energy and how he showed his love and care for us. It really has changed my perspective on him. And it's really changed my perspective on our relationship through my whole life. Again, not having kids, but you get more responsibilities. There's more burdens as you get older and you still want to hold on to the things that give you joy and happiness, but it's harder. It becomes harder and harder. But I really did appreciate that. And whether it was this movie or what happened in my life, I think a combination of things has made me really look at our relationship a lot differently. And I think we're so much closer. I just appreciate him a lot more. And this movie is a reminder that whether, you think your dad is lying or not, if they're trying to give you something and they're doing the best they can, that this is the best that they can do, you should probably appreciate it, even if you didn't back in the day.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing. And I can totally agree because it's just that sort of shift from your mentality as a teenager to when you do start to sort of think about the why and the reasons behind. And I love the fact that in this movie, at the very end, it couldn't have ended in a more beautiful way to me. Like you could, if you wrote a story and you were writing the perfect ending to that story, I think this was the way to go. Like it completes both character arcs. Ed Bloom Sr. gets the send off that he kind of deserves, and Will provides that for him. And it's almost like a passing of the torch because, the quote at the end says, "A man tells his story so many times, he becomes the stories and they live on after him. And in that way, he does become immortal." So at the moment, I've told you before, but my father's in the hospital at the moment. He's suffering from dementia and has for some time. And it like that's, as the decline sort of happens as time passes, that's almost those stories and those memories, that's all you kind of have that's left, because the man that you knew sort of changes into something that is different. And, you watch the people that love him sort of move through that grieving process as well, which was beautiful to see, especially the bath scene when him and his wife are in the bath and they're just having that moment together. That's just so touching. And I think that sort of send off where his son meets him halfway, accepts him for who he is, because that's all you can ask for as a father, is just to have that understanding and to know that, those lessons that you want to impart sort of have that impact. And for me, the line at the end that Will says, "You became what you always were, a big fish," that sort of indicates to me that, the big fish is the thing that you never catch, but it's the story, or it's the thing you catch in the story you tell all the time. So the whole time, his dad just wanted to be remembered fondly. And I think that's all we can wish for, really. And I can relate and attest to that in that moment of my life right now. I think that was just a perfect end.
Yeah, man, well said. And also, thank you for sharing that with me. And it is great, right? Immortality, as far as I know, doesn't exist yet. Maybe Walt Disney is somewhere under Disneyland frozen, but I don't think that exists at this moment. And it is the way that legends live on, right? It's the stories we tell about them and it's how we tell it. And Edward, whether he was being exaggerative or not, in his mind, the way he told it, he lived a good life and he lived a big life. And I think it's wonderful. It's the way that, I know I'm not a perfect person. I know I don't do everything perfectly. There's so many mistakes I made and I don't want to be remembered for my mistakes. I want to be remembered for the good things that I tried to do and the way I tried to help people or be there for people. And that's what Will discovers at the end. He really discovers the heart of his dad and why you tell these stories, whether they were lies or over exaggerated, it really doesn't matter. The core of it was he tried to be there for people and do the best he can. And I love it. It is, you're right, a perfect ending. It's completely cyclical. He becomes the thing that he's always tried to create and make. And I guess I still relate to that too. Whether it's Will adopting some of the practices of his dad and seeing the good in everything he tried to do, or in Edward of just trying to make your life the best you can and to give back and just and all the people he's helped with show up at his funeral. And the son sees like these weren't lies. He actually was there for these people. Again, maybe the Siamese twin or how tall the giant was a little over exaggerated, but the core of it, the root of it was true. And I just think it's so beautiful. Either way, you look at both sides, and the dad even going out on his own terms and letting his son you decide the ending. How do you think this story goes? I think it's wonderful.
Yeah. And some moments that I loved in that ending scene, I completely agree. When he's being taken down into the water and the last person he sees is his wife, and he touches her gently on the chin and says, "My girl in the water." It's like I've been looking for you my whole life. You've been with me my whole life in moments of turmoil, in moments of tragic, in moments of joy, in moments of triumph. You've been there. You've been my girl in the water. I've always seen you when I've been in my darkest hours, and you're here at the end as well. Like that was just beautiful for me. And then, at the end when there is no dialogue, it's just like a swelling piano score by Danny Elfman, amazing composer, and it's just all the people from Ed Bloom's life just chatting, and you can tell that they're telling the stories that he told them, and in that way, a man can live forever. And I think that's just the beautiful part of it, because they're all happy. There's not a sorrowful or a sad face, just as Will told it in his fictional story to his father at his real funeral, Edward Bloom. There was nobody there that was upset in the moments afterwards. Obviously, during the funeral there was, but afterwards there was just nobody there that was sad, and they were just sharing those stories about the man that they remembered. And that would be so much of a blessing for his son Will to see, that other people loved his father as much as he did. And I think that's just so special and beautiful. And I honestly thank Tim Burton for making this film and for doing it so much justice. And I think I read somewhere that he actually suffered a loss, and that's sort of what inspired him to explore this. Because I think that it's a universal theme, parenthood, father-son relationships, and also just that experience of loss is just so universal. And I think it's just a beautiful movie, and I can see why it's one of your favorites, Thomas. I really can.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, well said. I think last couple of things I want to shout out, because based on what you just said, was the realization from Will that these stories were at its core true. I love that where he's looking around and he's seeing all the people at the funeral. He's like, wait, Dad wasn't lying. And more confirmation there. I love that. Again, it kind of speaks to our realizations as we get older and we look back at our parents and what they did. I love that part. And you're right. It's a celebration of his life, where of course, it's always sad when somebody passes away and leaves us behind, but there is a lot to celebrate because of it. I think that sadness and that grief can be a great indicator of a life well lived from someone else. I think a lot now about the duality of things and how certain sad moments can bring positivity, and there are positive aspects of it that can really bring a lot to the people that are still around or still alive or still kind of trying to move on or go on. And I love it too. I just think he nailed it with this. I don't remember or know if he suffered a personal tragedy, but it feels like he has, and it feels like he learned a lot from it, and he put it in this movie. And I still, to this day, after how many times I've watched it, learned so much from your take on it. And dude, talk about gratitude. I appreciate the hell out of that. That was awesome.
Thanks so much for talking to me about this. And I think what you just said is a perfect way to end it. What you said about grief is just so beautiful, because we've heard, it's going around at the moment, but Andrew Garfield talking about grief, and he talks about how it's the unexpressed love that he has for the person that's gone. And I think that's exemplified perfectly in that end scene. It's that unexpressed love. Missing somebody and grieving somebody is exactly that. So that's really great perspective, Thomas. Thank you for sharing. Oh, good going. All right, let's do our sign-offs now. Let's do our sign-offs. If you want to be a part of the conversation for the Fandom Portals podcast, we have a few ways for you to do that. We have our Instagram and our Threads account on social media. That's probably the best way. We're very active on Threads. I love Threads. It's a great community for people to be on. And we often shout out our threaders in the podcast. If you guys have something to say about the media that we're reviewing, definitely jump on and have your say. If your question or your feedback is more of a long form, then you can definitely hit us up on email, which is fandomportals@gmail.com. All of these in the show notes below. And we thank you so much, because the interactions is definitely what makes this awesome. As we saw today, the interactions with Thomas just like amazing to connect with something that you love. And that's what we want to share on the social media space as well. That's what we're hoping to grow it toward. So how about yourself, Thomas? Where can the people on the internet find you if they want some more of your amazing content and juicy wisdom?
None of that. If you wanted to hear me make dumb jokes about movies and shows, join us on the Joy Shtick show. The link will be in the show notes, and challenge accepted, which is really fun. If you want the latest reviews to all the hottest movies and shows, we do them as fast as we can. Right now we're covering Severance, but we've done House of the Dragon, The Acolyte, The Boys, everything. We watch it usually that night or the next morning, record, and we have like the latest breakdown reviews for you guys. Also part of the Geek Freaks Podcast Network, which has been awesome. And then if you're looking for something more about positivity and mental health and some hope, come check us out at Sick Burn Pod on Instagram. The Sick Burn Podcast hopefully will be out by February, and would love as much feedback and just interactions with you guys as much as possible if that's something you're into.
In great space as well. So thank you, Thomas, for sharing that. And thank you for creating such an amazing sort of set of podcasts for everybody's interests and all of that kind of thing too. And also thank you so much for joining me. It's been an amazing chat. Love catching up with you, my friend over the seas. So thanks again, man. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you too. Or I should say mahalo and aloha to everybody. Just appreciate it. Big fan of the show. I think you're doing an amazing job. So can't wait to hear the feedback on this one. And if other people out there know about Big Fish, it seems like it's like a secret, but anytime someone watches it, they love it. So yeah, I want more people definitely talking about this one.
I think so too. It's just, it's a great set of messages through. And I think it's a really great one to chat with your friends about. So awesome job. All right, guys, we'll see you later.